During this session, I'm going to walk through a sample inpatient psychiatric facility PEPPER to help you understand the statistics and what they could mean for you. Now remember, your PEPPER is a Microsoft Excel workbook, and you will navigate within the PEPPER by clicking on the Worksheet tab along the bottom of the screen. Of course, you can also print your PEPPER by using the print function within Excel. The first page that you'll see when you open your PEPPER is called the Purpose page. It will identify for you the most recent time period of statistics that are summarized in the PEPPER. It will identify for you here the provider number or the CMS certification number and your provider name. We'll refer you to the PEPPER User's Guide available on our website if you need assistance using the report, as well as our help desk to submit questions or request assistance. We do include a link to the pepperresources.org website within the PEPPER, as well as a link to the Training and Resources page where additional resources are available. Here you will see the version number of the PEPPER, which is always the most recent time period of statistics. So this is the PEPPER version Q4 FY16 or fiscal year 16. And here you would see your MAC jurisdiction. This is the Medicare Administrative Contractor to which your IPF submits its claims for Medicare reimbursement. And the jurisdiction comparison group includes all of the IPFs that submit their claims to the same MAC. The next worksheet down here is the Definitions tab, and we do include this worksheet in the PEPPER as a reference so that you can identify the numerator and the denominator definition for each of the target areas within your PEPPER. Sometimes people are looking at their statistics and they have questions about what does the numerator represent or what does the denominator represent. So we include the numerator and denominator definition for all of the target areas in this report. In addition, you'll notice that these target area names here are hyperlinked. So if you click on the name of the target area, it will take you to the target area report for that individual target area. You can go back to the definitions worksheet by clicking on the tab here, or on the link there, rather. The next report in the IPF PEPPER is called the Compare Targets Report. And I like to refer to this report as the heart of the PEPPER. It is the only report where you can see all of your target area, all the your statistics for the target areas, all in one place. It is restricted to the statistics for the most recent time period, so that would be the most recent fiscal year. And so you'll see the statistics for all of the target areas for which you have reportable data. That would be the numerator count is at least 11. So let's take a few minutes and review this report. It has a lot of good information. Here we'll see the target area name. There is a brief description of the target area numerator and denominator here. In this column, you will find the number of target discharges or the numerator count. This column identifies your target area percent, essentially the numerator divided by the denominator, which is not on this particular report, times 100. Then you'll see your national percentile, your jurisdiction percentile, and your state percentile. And lastly, we include the sum of Medicare payments for the numerator discharges. So let's take a look at the first target area for comorbidity, which is the proportion of discharges that have at least one comorbidity coded on the claim as compared to all discharges. So we see that we have 76 discharges in the most recent fiscal year that have at least one comorbidity coded on the claim. which gives us a target area percent of 9.8%. But how do we know how we compare to other IPFs in terms of percent of claims with a comorbidity? Well, again, that's where the percentiles can come in so handy. So remember, when we calculate the percentiles, we take the target area percent for all of the IPFs in the comparison group. So here we're looking at all IPFs in the nation. And we order those target area percents from highest to lowest. We identify where your target area percent falls, and your percentile will tell you what percentage of IPFs have a lower target area percent. So for this target area, this IPF is at the 4.0 national percentile. So that means that 4% of all IPFs in the nation have a lower target area percent than we do. So relatively speaking, our target area percent is really low compared to most IPFs. It's almost at the very bottom. Now remember, in the PEPPER, we identify providers as high outliers when their national percentile is greater than or equal to 80, and as low outliers when their national percentile is less than or equal to 20. The comorbidities target area is the only target area in the IPF report that's concerned with the potential for overcoding as well as undercoding. And an unusually low target area percent could indicate undercoding of comorbidities. And so you can see that this IPF is at the 4.0 national percentile, and so their target area percent is identified as in green italics, which is a visual cue that they are a low outlier for this target area. And so that might be something that they might want to look at to make sure that they're capturing the comorbidities that may be present within the medical record, or that their documentation is strong enough to capture all the comorbidities that may be present. Now, when we look at the jurisdiction percentile, we see that we are at the 4.3 jurisdiction percentile. So this tells us that as compared to all IPFs in the MAC jurisdiction comparison group, 4.3% of them have a lower target area percent than we do. And when compared to all IPFs in our state, 7.6% have a lower target area percent than we do. And here we can see that our IPF received about $1.5 million in Medicare reimbursement for these 76 discharges. So as we look at this particular targets report, we can see that this IPF and their percentiles, none of their national percentiles are greater than or equal to 80. So we don't see any target areas here in which our IPF is a high outlier. I generally encourage providers to consider 3 factors when they're trying to prioritize what they're going to be focusing on as a result of their PEPPER. They would want to look at their national percentiles to see if they were extremely high, that would be in the 90th or greater percentile, extremely low, perhaps 10th percentile or lower, even though in the PEPPER we identify outliers as greater than or equal to the 80th national percentile or less than or equal to the 20th percentile for this comorbidities target area. Consider the volume of discharges involved. Is the volume great? Then that would be another factor to consider. High volume areas would merit additional attention, as well as target areas that have a great amount of Medicare reimbursement. A couple of other things. This report is the only location within the PEPPER where you can see your hospital's exact percentiles for nation, jurisdiction, and state. You will not see this information on any of the target area reports, only on the compare targets report and only for the most recent fiscal year. So let's take a look at the comorbidities target area. This is the target area that we were identified as a low outlier on the compare targets report. Each of the target area reports is set up in the same fashion. You'll see your provider number and name up here at the top left. There are some guiding suggestions here as to how to interpret your target area information. You will see your graph for the comorbidities target area. And your target area percent is graphed for the most recent 3 fiscal years as these blue bars. So here you would see your target area percent, and here is the graph so that you can see how your target area percent might be changing over time. And you can also see how your target area percent compares to the 20th percentile and to the 80th percentile. The 20th and 80th percentiles for the nation, which are the solid line, the jurisdiction, which is the dashed line, and the state, which is the dotted line, are included on the graph so that you can gauge how close you are to either of those points or lines in the sand, so to speak, and determine if there is a reason that you should think about looking at more closely at some of these target areas. I always encourage providers when they see changes in the target area statistics over time to ask themselves if that change is reflective of what they would expect to see. Perhaps they've had a change in their patient population. Maybe there have been some changes in the clinical staff or in services that they are offering at their provider. Maybe they've eliminated a service line or added some new services that might affect their statistics in one way or another. Have there been changes in coding or billing staff? Have there been efforts made to improve documentation, which might then lead to greater capturing of comorbidities? Those types of things. So as you're looking at your target area statistics, look at the changes over time. Ask yourself if the statistics in your report reflect what you expect to see, and if not, then you might want to take a closer look, perhaps audit some records or some claims. So below the graph, we have the target area data table, which will show you for the most recent 3 fiscal years your target area percent. And your target area percent will be color-coded in green italics if you are at or below the national 20th percentile, as we are here. And it will be in red bold print if you are at or above the national 80th percentile. Here we'll see the numerator count. Then we'll see the denominator count. We include the average length of stay for the numerator discharges as well as for the denominator discharges. The average amount of Medicare reimbursement for the numerator discharges, and the total amount of Medicare reimbursement for the numerator discharges. Below the IPF specific data table, we include the comparative data, which identifies the percent that is at the 80th percentile for nation, jurisdiction, and state. And also for the comorbidities target area, we identify the percent that is at the 20th percentile for nation, jurisdiction, and state. And these are the values that are graphed as these red and green trend lines in the graph at the top of the report. Now below the comparative data on all of our target area reports, we include suggested intervention for instances where providers are either a high outlier as identified within the PEPPER or a low outlier. So, for example, this particular target area is focused on the potential for either overcoding of comorbidities or undercoding of comorbidities. And so we have suggested interventions for high outliers and for low outliers that helps you think about what might be the concern and the consideration and how might I approach looking at this more closely. So let's take a look now at the no secondary diagnoses target area. The no secondary diagnoses is concerned with complete coding of all of the coexisting diagnoses that beneficiaries may have. Now keep in mind, they may not all necessarily be psychiatric diagnoses, but any active medical condition should be coded on the claim. Should be coded and reported so that way there's accurate information regarding the beneficiaries that receive services. So this particular IPF has a very low percent of claims that do not have any secondary diagnoses coded. So that would be interpreted as a good thing because they are doing a good job at coding additional diagnoses. When we look at the outlier payments target area, we see that this provider has reportable data for the for the older two time periods, but none for the most recent time period. And we can see the blue bar here for the oldest time period. The target area percent is so tiny that it's not really showing up on the bar for the second time period, and then there is no information calculated for the most recent time period, fiscal year 2016. Remember that sometimes you will see target area reports that don't have reportable data for all of the target areas, or for all of the time periods, or sometimes there may be entire target area reports that don't have information, and so that doesn't reflect a problem with the PEPPER. It just means that there's not sufficient data to generate statistics. When we look at the 3 to 5 day readmissions target area, here this target area is looking to assess the risk for potential circumvention of the interrupted stay policy, where patients who are readmitted within 3 consecutive days from discharge are treated as a continuation of the initial admission for reimbursement purposes. So we can see that in the older two time periods here, this provider had a fairly high target area percent. They were well above the national 80th percentile. We can see that visually here. Their target area percents are printed in red, bold print. And for the most recent fiscal year, those statistics have decreased, so they are no longer above the national 80th percentile. So if this provider actively looked into concerns regarding 3 to 5 day readmissions, and if they actually took some steps to improve that, then the PEPPER would be a way to confirm that those changes were effective. This is the target area statistics for 30-day readmission. Here we can see that our statistics are below the 80th percentile for nation, jurisdiction, and state, and our statistics seem to be relatively stable over time. So these statistics don't seem to raise any cause for alarm. The one-day stays report is entirely blank, and probably most IPFs will see their one-day stays target area report that looks the same. There are only a few IPFs that have sufficient data to generate statistics for this target area, about 4%. So do not be alarmed if your one-day stays target area report does not have any statistics available. No ancillary charges. This target area is concerned with the unbundling of ancillary charges. And so if IPFs don't submit any ancillary charges, the concern is that those services might have been provided separately through other providers at an additional cost to the Medicare program. And so this particular provider does not have very many claims at all or discharges where there aren't any ancillary charges, and so that would be considered a good thing. You can see their target area percent is very small, barely visible here on the graph. However, if your target area graph looks different, if you have a high percentage of claims that don't have any ancillary charges, you might revisit with your billing staff to make sure that the ancillary charges are being submitted on the claim and that they're not being provided outside of the services that should be included in the DRG payment. Now, also included in the IPF PEPPER as a supplemental report is a report that identifies the top DRGs for the most recent fiscal year or most recent 4 quarters. So this report will identify the DRG number, the DRG description, will show you the total number of discharges for the DRG, and the report is sorted in descending order based on the total number of discharges by DRG. We calculate the proportion of discharges for each DRG to total discharges, and we identify your average length of stay for each of those DRGs. Now, this report will display up to 20 DRGs as long as there are at least 11 discharges for the DRG in the most recent fiscal year. We can only display these DRGs on the report if there are at least 11. And so if you only see a few DRGs listed on this report, the reason would be there are fewer than 11 discharges for those other DRGs within the fiscal year. Down here we have some summary information for the top DRGs as well as all of the DRGs. So you can see your overall average length of stay here. And then we provide on the Jurisdiction Top DRGs tab a similar report, but it aggregates discharges for all of the IPFs in the MAC jurisdiction. So it will include the same type of information as what is included on your IPF-specific report. It just summarizes at the jurisdiction level. And so here you'll be able to see the jurisdiction average length of stay as well as the national average length of stay for those top 20 DRGs. And again, this is a comparative report that is supplemental. These top reports don't have any bearing on your risk for improper payments, but they're just meant to be included to give you additional information about the services that are provided at your IPF.